one told you life was gonna be this way. Your job's a joke, you broke, your love life's the old way. It's like you're always stuck in second gear. When it hasn't been your day, or maybe your month, or even your year. But I'll be there for you.
Hey HL class, this is Mr. D, and we're going to be continuing with more diplomacy. Last time we talked about the big stick diplomacy. This time we'll be talking about dollar and moral diplomacy. All right, so last time we talked about the BAMF, that is Teddy Roosevelt, and his big stick policy and the corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. So the corollary would be in Venezuela and Dominican Republic. Basically, if Europeans wanted to collect their debts, America would do it on their behalf. So at least now we're intervening on behalf of the Europeans instead of risking the Europeans going and invading. We also used the big stick in Panama to help it gain independence. He also spoke very softly, though. Remember his quote, "Speak softly, carry a big stick." In the Russo-Japanese War, he mediated it between Japan and Russia, and also in the Algeciras Conference in Morocco. How did Latinos see this? Well, basically, they saw Teddy Roosevelt as someone that is just invading and stealing everything from Latin America. Rightly so. Rightly so. Let's pause real quick and have you copy this down. Taft's dollar diplomacy. All right. So, William Howard Taft, one of the biggest, and I mean it, biggest presidents we've ever had. Instead of military might like Teddy, he believed in the power of financial wizardry, all right? And he used his bankers to, A, provide U.S. loans to pay off European debts. He would use his financial managers to help remake economies that were game to allow Americans in. Unfortunately for Latin America, of course, these new economies tended to benefit America, as you could imagine. This is the early 20th century after all. But tax collection was made efficient, and it was on the gold standard, so the world could now trade with Latin America. It did help modernize them, even though it did tend to make it pro-American. Now, most Latin American countries saw this as thinly veiled imperialism. They rejected it, all right? Costa Rica and Guatemala, they just didn't even play games. They rejected it outright. They knew this was economic imperialism. After Honduras rejected it, though, America straight out sponsored a revolution. We installed the pro-United States regime. It sucks for them, right? In Nicaragua, an amazing patriot, Jose Santos Zelaya, was trying to create a Central American republic. Think about an EU or a Mercosur, but just of Central American countries. Of course, this is too good to be true. America sponsored a revolution, and then we purchased all the railroads and banks of Nicaragua so that there was no chance that anybody could ever control Nicaragua again, and we occupied it for about 20 years, Nicaragua. In Cuba, after the Platt Amendment, we basically purchased 10% of all the land, 80% of all industry, or sugar, tobacco, and all the railroads. This is, again, why Fidel Castro and Che Guevara were so keen on getting rid of America and its influence in the region by the 1950s and 60s. In Haiti, one of our dictators was facing a rebellion, and she could no longer fulfill her debts to both us and France, so we invaded in 1915 and took over the treasury, and we repaid ourselves and France. So, as you can see, dollar diplomacy didn't work out so well, and Taft reverted back to military might. That's pretty much how this went down. Let me show you, though, dollar diplomacy by the numbers. In 1914, here are the places that America is investing in, all right? Europe, $600 million, but Latin America, $1.6 billion. And what were we investing in mainly? Mining and smelting, public utilities, railroads, agriculture, and oil. We were controlling the heart of these countries, all right? That's called economic imperialism. Where was our focus mainly? The Caribbean and Central America. A bit in Brazil, Chile, and Argentina, but right at this point, the Europeans, the Italians, the Germans had already gotten much of that, okay? Here we can see Taft wanted to write some checks. He was a pretty big dude, as you can see here. He's all about dollar diplomacy. A huge dude. It's rumored that he actually got stuck in a bathtub once, but the truth is his bathtub was actually huge. It was made specially for him. He was a big guy. All right. Here we can see dollar diplomacy at work. Hopefully, if we shoot money at it, it'll be fixed. Didn't work out so well. We reverted oftentimes back to military might, like in Honduras, where we overthrew the president there. And we bought all their industry, or Nicaragua, where we invaded and we offed the Nicaraguan president. Here we can see a very sad cartoon. See little bird now. Look pleasant, please, Nicaragua, not looking so happy as America points her guns at you. All right? Now, Zelaya tried to fight back, to no avail. We purchased all the valuable infrastructure. In 1925, we'd invade again and eventually assassinate a very important man named Augusto Sandino. That's why the Sandinistas in the 1970s would fight against the dictator we put into place for the next 40 years, Anastasio Somoza. So that's all us, Nicaragua. Here's the kind of cartoons yellow journalists tried to put forward to make it seem like we were doing the right thing, but not really the case. And of course, with the Platt Amendment, America was locked in. We owned 80% of all Cuban industry. And in Haiti, when they had a little bit of a revolt and rebellion, we invaded with Marines and paid ourselves back. So as you can see, no matter what the nation, Panama, Honduras, Nicaragua, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Cuba, if you were in the Caribbean, you were not having a good time and you probably hate America. Rightfully so, because we were after things like your oil palm, your bananas, your sugar industry. We wanted everything that you had and we were ready to steal it from you. Okay? Now, will he let go? It's not looking like it. So, just so you understand the diplomacies here, Teddy Roosevelt's all about might. The big man, Howard Taft, is about the money, but he reverts back to might when it doesn't work out. The next guy, Woodrow Wilson, he'll be all about morals. Let me show you this quick little video about Howard Taft. It's honestly one of the more boring videos, but it's hard to find a good one on him. Let's watch.
As president, Taft took a narrow legal route in all matters, quite different from the precedent-setting Roosevelt. In truth, the two men were opposites in almost every way. Roosevelt was famous for his athleticism, while Taft was often ridiculed because of his weight.
Taft had a long experience as an overweight man. He was big all his life. And he had a great sense of humor about that and about everything. He would love to tell a joke about being on the streetcar. He said, I got up and I gave my seat to 3 ladies.
But once in the White House, Taft's jovial personality began to falter, largely because he hated the glare and scrutiny of the intense political spotlight on the presidency.
He became grumpy and depressed. And, of course, he ate more and more and more. And he gained 100 pounds, up to 355 pounds. This was a symptom of his unhappiness.
In what must have been the ultimate humiliation, Taft once had to be pried out of the White House bathtub.
They finally put in a new bathtub in the White House that was reputed to be as big as a small swimming pool.
Taft's discomfort in the presidency was also apparent in his weak leadership.
He generally, as a rule, delegated responsibility, and he allowed most of his cabinet members to pretty much do as they pleased.
Taft fretted over making decisions and often procrastinated. He believed the president's job was merely to uphold the Constitution. Groundbreaking policies set by the freewheeling Roosevelt were slowly starting to reverse under Taft.
All right, pretty big guy, right? Pretty big guy. Let's pause so you can copy moral diplomacy. All right, so unlike Roosevelt and Taft, Woodrow Wilson's predecessors, Woodrow Wilson wanted to encourage human rights and liberty. Okay, remember, this is the guy that gave us the 14 points right before the Treaty of Versailles in World War I. Now, he's a humanitarian. He was a professor at Princeton. He was well ahead of his time, but unfortunately for him, his diplomacy was stopped by real nationalism and civil strife. And we got 3 really good examples here. For example, in China, the United States tried to recognize Dr. Sun Yat-sen's 1911 revolution. You'll know about this very soon if we haven't already begun. But other nations did not follow suit. For example, Japan just completely expanded her influence. And eventually we caved and we joined other nations in exploiting China once again and offered predatory loans and threatened action if the Chinese defaulted on it. So we did not leave in good standing with China. In the Dominican Republic, we tried to impose free elections, but a civil war began and we were forced to occupy. We were just forced to occupy it in 1924. You know, we just had to invade. And in Mexico, and as you'll learn very soon, we're going to have a 12-part series on the Mexican Revolution after this next exam. General Huerta overthrew the Madero government and America was not happy about it. We couldn't support, unfortunately, the anti-Huerta opposition because everybody in Mexico hated America generally. So instead we invaded the port of Veracruz, we enforced an arms embargo, and although they eventually overthrew Huerta, the Civil War continued on, eventually killing over 2 million Mexicans. All right, it was a bad, bad revolution, and we just stood there and did nothing about it. For moral diplomacy, it unfortunately ran into the complicated realities of actual diplomacy, and that's the problem with it. So here we can see peace on earth is what Woodrow Wilson hoped for, harmony. But what did he actually see? In places like China, where Japan took advantage, he saw that it's much more difficult to make it happen. All right? In the Dominican Republic, he tries to impose liberal democracy, and instead, foreign complications. He gets a civil war, as you can see here in this photograph. In Mexico, he tries to help out and gets shot by Pancho Villa, a very famous guy you're going to know very well very soon as we study the Mexican Revolution. Here we can see Francisco Villa, the star of the Mexican Revolution. Moral diplomacy failed when war with Mexico almost happened. So we're going to be finishing with this last slide after we see this awesome video, a modern take on Villa. I love this take on Villa.
Can Crazy Horse crush another freedom fighter from the same continent? Pancho Villa, the 20th century military genius of the Mexican Revolution, whose innovative use of quick strike forces and devoted peasant masses defeated much larger government armies. Carrying the flag for Pancho Villa, a marksman in mounted combat and Villa historian, Fernando Vasquez.
The people that hated Pancho Villa were those that were afraid of him. The thing is that more people loved him than hated him. His strategy, his intellect, make him the deadliest warrior.
Joining Fernando, early 20th century firearms expert and great-grandson of one of Villa's generals, Santiago Villalobos.
Pancho Villa, to the Mexican people, is known as the Mexican Robin Hood. He'd take all the riches from the rich landowners and he'd make them sign everything over to the peasants.
Growing up an indentured peon on the Mexican hacienda, Pancho's rage against the wealthy was ignited when his sister was assaulted by the rich landowner.
What set him apart was that he would say, this is wrong, I don't care who you are, you may be rich, you may be powerful, but you are doing wrong, and I'm gonna correct that wrong.
Like Crazy Horse, this childhood tragedy catapulted him to a life of war. When Mexico erupted in revolt against dictators in 1910, Villa organized ordinary peasants into a deadly rebel army.
What made Pancho Villa a great warrior, that he was relentless. He would not stop until the dictators were out of Mexico.
Pretty badass, right? You got to admit, that was pretty cool. Who would win? All right, last little bit on just an international law question, the idea of extraterritoriality. What does that mean exactly? That means basically when a country tries to enforce its laws outside of its borders. And this was how we were going to basically play the game of imperialism with our neighbors. Foreign businessmen oftentimes tried to enforce contracts against countries who were trying to protect their sovereignty. And as soon as their contracts weren't enforced, they called upon America to try to enforce it for them. Now, two counter doctrines resulted in countering this idea of extraterritoriality. The first by a man named Carlos Calvo, both I believe are Argentinian doctrines. Calvo just said, I don't know what you guys are talking about. There's no such thing as international law. If you are loaning money to a country, it will be enforced by the country who the money was lent to. All you can do is hope that they treat foreigners as well as you treat foreigners within your own borders. That's where it finishes. But a more workable doctrine would be the Drago doctrine by Louis Drago. It says basically that countries cannot use force to collect debts owed to its nationals. Much more workable, you're putting the burden on the countries that are trying to wage war, and by 1907, the Hague Conference, an international conference, Carlos Calvo, international law does kind of exist. they would adopt this doctrine. Now, America wouldn't adopt it, but at least the rest of the world did. You know, it wasn't in our best interest. So, the Calvo Clause, just a reminder, it basically says there's no such thing as international law. What are y'all doing? The Drago Doctrine says it's anti-expansionist. It says don't you dare invade if you're trying to enforce country. And that would nullify the Roosevelt corollary we learned about last class. All right, so the Drago Doctrine nullifies, it stops the Roosevelt corollary. It says you can't be invading countries to help pay their debts. You have to follow the rules of international law. Now, this is big. You have an exam next time. All right, it's going to be an outline-based exam, not an essay. I'm going to give you just 30 minutes to do this. I don't expect a long, drawn-out essay. I just want bullet points to make sure you understand this material. All right. You will have the choice of these 3 prompts. You can choose which one you want to talk about, which one you want to write about. What I expect is it's very simple. You're going to put the essay on top when you come into class. You're going to write the prompt. You're going to put your thesis. Then you're going to put your first body paragraph from the thesis, and you're going to just bullet point and tell me what you think belongs under that body paragraph. Basic points that would make sense to anybody reading your outline. Remember that this is a game, and I'm just looking to see that you've mastered this material. You can choose. The art of choosing is going to help you out here. Which one of these 3 prompts do you think would be the easiest to study for next time? So, the first prompt is examine the effects of the Spanish-American War on U.S. foreign policy. So the effects of the Spanish-American War, what were the effects of it? 2, I want you to contrast and compare dollar diplomacy with big stick diplomacy on how things worked out. And that would be these previous 2 lectures. And the third one would be, what are the ideological reasons for U.S. expansion? That's one of the earliest lectures we had. Is it the moral reasons, the practical reasons, the economic reasons, etc.? So you choose which one you want to talk about, and hopefully you'll do well. I'm going to provide you with earplugs, and class will continue. You guys are going to be doing this test while I'm going to be giving class. You will then be responsible for keeping up with the class. You're not going to have homework because of this exam, and your homework will be to catch up with the PowerPoint you missed in class. We got to keep it going here because we're trying to cover 2 years worth of work into 1 year. I hope you understand. So make sure you study for this, all right? And good luck. You'll have an exam next time. Hopefully you've been watching these lectures and hopefully you know about this. I'm not going to announce this in class. And good luck and study hard.